The sun is going down over a sandstone cliff in eastern Utah, and the rock is starting to glow the color of an old penny. A quick word before we go deeper. These stories don't end. There's a new, unsolved one waiting here every night. If that's the kind of thing you'd lead on in the dark, subscribe and I'll keep them coming. Now, look at the wall. Look closely, up high. Near a crack where a swallow once built a nest, there is a shape. It has no mouth. Its eyes are two hollow circles. Its body is long and straight, like a candle melted upward, and small thin arms hang at its sides. Beside it stands another, and another. A whole row of silent watchers carved into the desert stone, taller than any person who ever lived nearby. Nobody alive knows who made them. Nobody alive knows what they mean. They were already old when the first Spanish riders came clattering through these canyons with their iron and their crosses. They were old when the Ute and the Navajo first sang their songs in the shadow of these cliffs. The Carvers walked away from this rock thousands of years ago, and they took the meaning with them. But the marks stayed. That is the strange thing about petroglyphs and pictographs. They are everywhere across the American West. Tens of thousands of them, maybe hundreds of thousands, pecked into basalt with hammerstones, painted in red ochre onto sheltered overhangs, scratched into sandstone with the patience of someone who had nothing but time and a story to tell. From the deep canyons of the Colorado Plateau to the lava fields of California, from the gorges of Oregon down into the brushlands of Texas, the rock remembers. And we cannot read it. You can read a Roman tombstone if you study Latin. You can read Egyptian hieroglyphs because a stone called the Rosetta gave us the key. You can read the cuneiform of old Sumer because scholars cracked it open more than 100 years ago. But the marks on these American cliffs have no Rosetta, no second language carved beside them, no bilingual scribe leaning over a desk to translate. There are spirals. There are stick figures with hands lifted. There are bighorn sheep walking in long, patient lines. There are shields the size of a man, decorated with patterns that almost feel like faces. There are wavy lines that might be rivers, or snakes, or lightning, or the road a soul takes after death. There are creatures with antlers growing from human shoulders. There are great horned beings that loom over smaller ones like teachers, or kings, or gods. A quick word before we go deeper. These stories don't end. There's a new unsolved one waiting here every night. If that's the kind of thing you'd leave on in the dark, subscribe and I'll keep them coming. Some researchers believe these marks are a language, a real one. Maybe a calendar that tracked the shifting sun. Maybe a map of trade routes and water holes. Maybe the record of who hunted here and who passed through and who was buried beneath the soft red sand. Others believe the marks are not language at all. They are prayers. They are visions seen behind closed eyes. They are the trembling pictures the mind makes when a person fasts too long under a desert sky. Both ideas might be true. Neither idea might be true. The rock does not say. What we do know is this: the carvings were made over an enormous stretch of time. A single panel can hold marks separated by 1,000 years, layered one on top of the next, like quiet conversation between people who never met. A hunter from a forgotten age tapped his image into the stone. Centuries later, another hand added a sun beside it. Centuries after that, someone drew a horse, because the horse had finally come to this country with the Spanish, and the world had changed. The war kept listening. Tonight, we are going to walk along that wall. We will move slowly, the way a person moves at dusk when the light is failing and the air is cool and the canyons smell of juniper smoke, we will visit the giant figures of Sego Canyon. We will sit at Newspaper Rock, where 2,000 symbols crowd together like a busy street. We will trace the spirals of Chaco, the painted snakes of the Pecos, the carved tracks that lead straight into a river and never come out. We are going to ask what the marks mean. We will not always get an answer. That is the gift of this story. Picture a wall of stone the color of rust and old honey rising out of the desert floor like the side of a sleeping animal. The sandstone is striped where rain has run down it for 10,000 years. Each stripe is a different shade, black and copper and pale gold, laid one over the other in long ribbons. This is the place where the mystery lives. This is the canvas the old hands chose. The American West holds more rock art than any other corner of this country. It stretches from the lava fields of southern Oregon, down through the painted hills of Utah, across the red mesas of Arizona, into the dry hearts of Nevada and California. It runs east into Texas, where the Pecos River cuts its slow path through limestone. It climbs north into Wyoming and Montana. Every state in the dry West holds carved walls. Some hold thousands. A few hold tens of thousands. The air in these places is thin and clean. It smells of warm stone and crushed sage and the faint sweet rot of juniper berries fallen into the sand. In the morning, before the sun climbs high, the rocks glow pink and the shadows lie long and blue across the floor of the canyon. By noon, the heat presses down like a heavy hand, and the cliffs throw back the light so hard it hurts to look at them. By evening, the stone turns the color of a slow ember, and the petroglyphs come alive in the slanting gold. These walls remember weather most people will never see. They remember flash floods that tore through narrow canyons and left polished stone behind. They remember snow piled deep against north-facing rock. They remember lightning that split the silence and lit up every carved spiral for one white instant. The desert is patient. It saves what falls into it. The carvers worked in seasons. They came when the cottonwoods turned yellow along the creek bottoms, and again when the spring water ran cold and clear from the rock. They came in deerskin and woven yucca sandals. They carried tools of bone and harder stone, river quartz the size of a fist, antler tines worn smooth at the tip. They mixed paints in shallow grinding bowls. Red came from hematite, the iron-rich earth that stains a finger when you touch it. Black came from manganese, or from charcoal mixed with animal fat. White came from gypsum and crushed shell. Yellow came from limonite, the color of pollen. They worked by daylight, but some panels face east and some face west, and a few sit so deep inside an alcove that the sun only reaches them on certain days of the year. The carvers knew this. They knew where the light would fall and when. The country around these walls has not changed much. The rivers still cut the same channels. The cottonwoods still root in the same wet sand. Bighorn sheep still pick their way along the same ledges, hooves clicking on stone, just as their ancestors did when the first carver lifted the first hammerstone. A raven still calls from the rim, and the call still bounces between the cliffs and comes back twice. If you sit quietly on the canyon floor, you can almost feel the centuries fold together. The wall in front of you is the same wall they touched. The light on it is the same light. These places do not belong to one era. A panel may hold a figure pecked in the time of Mammoth, and a horse drawn after the Spanish came, and a cowboy's initials from 1887, and a child's chalked name from last summer. The rock holds everything. It does not sort, It does not explain. Many of these sites lie at the mouths of springs, or beside game trails, or along the old footpaths that ran from one valley to the next. They sit where people stopped, where people waited, where people gathered to wait out a storm, or to share food, or to mark the turning of the year. The walls were not hidden. They were meant to be seen. They were placed in the everyday flow of life, the way a town placed a courthouse on its square. What we have lost is the town around them. The lodges of brush and hide are gone. The cook fires are gone. The voices are gone. Only the wall remains, with its long ribbons of color and its quiet crowd of figures. The desert kept the painting and let the painters go. And so the question begins right there, at the foot of the stone, with the wind moving softly through the sage. High on a sandstone wall in eastern Utah, a figure stands almost 7 feet tall. He is painted the color of old blood, a deep rust red that has not faded in 3,000 years. His body is long and narrow, drawn like a single straight berm. His shoulders are wide. His arms hang at his sides, ending in fingers that look more like roots than hands. And, rising from the top of his head, curling up into the empty rock above him, are antlers. 2 long branching antlers, the kind a mule deer might carry through the high desert in late autumn. People who live near the canyon call him the hunter. Nobody knows his real name. Nobody ever will. The artist who made him left no signature, no village, no clay pot with matching marks. Only the figure on the wall, watching the dry wash below, waiting for something the rest of us cannot see. He belongs to a style of painting called Barrier Canyon, named for a place not far from where he stands. The people who made this style lived in Utah long before the Anasazi, long before the Fremont, long before any name we still remember. Picture them moving through the canyons in small bands, maybe a dozen at a time. They wore hides stitched with sinew. They carried atlatls, those clever spear throwers that put a stone-tipped dart through the ribs of a deer. At 30 paces, they drank from springs that bubbled up at the base of red cliffs. They slept under stone overhangs that smelled of wood smoke and juniper. They knew this country better than any map could ever show. They knew which gullies held water in July and which dried by April. They knew where the bighorn sheep walked at dawn. They knew the trees that bore pine nuts in good years, and the bushes whose berries would keep a child alive through a hard winter. They were patient people, slow-moving people, people who could sit on a warm rock for hours, watching the shadow of a hawk crawl across the sand. And somewhere among them was a painter, maybe more than one, maybe a whole line of painters, passing down their knowledge of pigments from grandmother to granddaughter, from uncle to nephew. They knew how to grind hematite into a fine red powder. They knew how to mix it with animal fat and plant juice and maybe a little spit until it flowed thick as honey. They knew how to climb a sheer wall with a small clay cup in one hand, pressing their bodies against the rock like lizards in the sun. The hunter with antlers was painted by one of these people. We can almost see them at work. The artist stands on a narrow ledge, brush made from a chewed yucca stem held lightly between 2 fingers. They have already drawn the body long and lean. Now they reach up to add the antlers, 1 branch at a time, slow and certain. The wind moves across the canyon. Somewhere below, a child laughs. A dog barks once and goes quiet. The painter does not look down. When the figure is done, the painter steps back. They study the wall the way you study a face you love. They add 1 more mark, a small dot beside the hunter's shoulder. Then they pack up the cup and the brush and climb down. They walk back to camp. They eat dried meat with their family. They sleep. The next morning, The sun rises and lights the antlered figure, and the hunter begins his long wait. 3,000 years pass. The painter's children grow old. Their children grow old. Empires rise and fall in distant lands the painter never heard of. The Romans build roads. The Romans crumble. The Vikings sail and vanish. Columbus blunders into the Caribbean. Wagons roll west across the prairie. Through all of it, the hunter stands on his wall. The rain washes him gently. The sun bakes him. The wind grinds away at the cliff face one grain at a time. He waits. Today, hikers come to see him. They walk up the canyon in summer, sweating in their wide-brimmed hats, water bottles bumping at their hips. They round a bend, and there he is, looming above them, tall and quiet and impossibly old. They stop talking. They look up. Some take pictures. Some just stand there with their mouths a little open. Almost everyone feels the same strange thing. The hunter is watching them back, and nobody, in 3,000 years of staring, has ever figured out what he sees. Picture a morning in Red Rock country, somewhere along the slow bend of the Colorado River. The sun comes up the way it always has, brushing the tops of the cliffs first, turning the stone the color of warm copper. The shadows in the canyon below take their time leaving. A raven calls once, then again, and the sound carries across the open air like a small bell rung in a wide room. This is the ordinary world of the painted walls, the world they have lived in for thousands of years, while people came and went below them. The cliffs do not hurry. The cliffs have already seen everything they need to see. In a small house near the canyon mouth, an old man pours coffee from a blue tin pot. He has lived in this valley his whole life. His grandfather lived here too, and his grandfather's grandfather, and the people before them whose names have softened into wind. He drinks the coffee on the porch and watches the light walk down the rock face, inch by inch. He knows the wall behind his house has marks on it, red marks, the color of dried berries made by hands that touched the stone before any wagon ever rolled west. He does not think about them every day. They are simply there, the way the river is there, the way the smell of sage drifts up after rain. Sometimes a visitor comes with a notebook and asks him what the figures mean. He shrugs and offers them coffee. He says the old people made them. He says the rock keeps them. That is enough. Down the road, a woman who teaches school walks her dog past a low ledge where small spirals curl into the sandstone. She has passed them 1,000 times. The dog sniffs at a clump of rabbit brush. The woman pauses, the way she always does, and runs one finger along the edge of a carved circle without touching it. She has a feeling the spiral was made for a reason, but she does not know the reason, and she has stopped needing to. The mystery sits beside her like a quiet friend. In another valley, far to the south, a rancher rides out at dawn to check on his cattle. His horse picks its way along a wash lined with cottonwoods. The leaves are turning, soft yellow against the pale stone on a cliff. Above the wash, painted figures stand in a long row, tall and thin, with hollow eyes and arms held out. The rancher tips his hat to them. He learned this from his father. His father learned it from a Ute man who worked the ranch in the old days. You tip your hat. You ride on, you do not stare. The painted ones do not mind. They have been standing there for maybe 4,000 years. Wind has rubbed them softer. Rain has rinsed them paler. A whole forest of junipers has grown and died and grown again at their feet. They keep their patient vigil, neither friendly nor cold, the way old things often are. In the towns nearby, life keeps its own slow rhythm. A diner serves green chili stew at noon. A gas station sells postcards with pictures of the carvings on them. 3 for $1, the ink already fading. Kids on bicycles race each other down dirt roads and never look up at the boulders where small handprints float in red ochre, pressed there by children who lived before the wheel reached this land. Those handprints are smaller than the hands of the boys riding past. Nobody notices. Nobody has to. The handprints are not asking to be noticed. A park ranger eats her lunch on a bench near a famous panel. She has read every book about the figures behind her. She knows the theories. She knows the arguments. She knows that the very oldest marks on the wall might be 10,000 years old, and the youngest might have been added when her own grandmother was a girl. The wall is a layered thing, she tells visitors, like a book where every generation wrote on the same page. She smiles when she says it. She does not pretend she can read the book. Evening comes the way it always does. The cliffs catch the last of the sun and hold it for a long minute, glowing as if lit from inside. The old man on his porch sets down his cup. The school teacher whistles for her dog. The rancher unsaddles his horse, and the painted figures on 1,000 walls across the desert wait through another night, patient as stone, holding their secret the way the canyon holds its shadow. Drive north, from Moab on a road that ribbons through red rock and rabbit brush, and the desert begins to thin out around you. The cliffs grow taller, the pavement narrows, the sky stretches into a pale dome, the color of washed denim, and the only sound is the soft hum of tires on warm asphalt. You pass a turnoff for a ghost town called Sego. The name sits on the sign like a whisper. Few people stop here. Fewer still know what waits a mile up the dirt track that bends behind a low ridge of broken sandstone. The canyon opens slowly, the way a hand opens to show what it has been holding. Pinyon pines lean from the slopes. Cottonwoods rustle in the wash. The walls rise on either side in long sweeps of cream and rust, streaked with that dark mineral glaze the old-timers called desert varnish. It looks like someone poured strong tea down the cliffs and let it dry there for 10,000 years. And then you see them. High on the smooth, flat face of the rock, the figures stand in a row. They are tall. They are silent. They have no mouths. Some of them have no arms. Their bodies are shaped like long, narrow gourds, painted in a deep red, the color of dried roses. Their eyes are huge and hollow and dark, like windows cut into a house with no one home. They float a few feet above the canyon floor, and they have been floating there for somewhere between 2,000 and 7,000 years. Nobody is sure which. The biggest one is nearly 8 feet tall. Locals call him the Sego giant. He stands at the center of the panel with smaller figures gathered around him, as if he is the one they came to see. His shoulders are wide, his head is broad and round. His eyes stare straight out at whoever stops to look up. He does not threaten you. He does not welcome you. He simply watches, the way a mountain watches, the way deep water watches. This style has a name now. The scholars call it Barrier Canyon style, and they say it belongs to a people who lived here long before the Fremont, long before the Ute, long before any name we still use. The Barrier Canyon people left no pottery anyone has matched to them with certainty. They left no villages that researchers can point to with full confidence. They left these figures, just these tall, standing figures, painted in red ochre on the flattest rock faces they could find. Some who study the panels believe the figures show spirits, beings the painters met during long fasts and trances in the canyon shadows. The huge dark eyes, they say, are the mark of a vision, the gaze that opens when the body sleeps and something else wakes. Others say the figures are ancestors, dressed in ceremonial robes that hid the arms and legs from view. Others still believe they are simply portraits of people the way the painters saw them, stripped down to the parts that mattered most. The truth is, nobody can say the painters did not leave a key. There is something else worth telling about Sego Canyon, something the guidebooks mention only in passing. If you stand quiet at the foot of the giant late in the afternoon, when the sun begins to slide behind the western rim, the red on the rock starts to glow. Not metaphorically, the pigment lights up like a coal blown on by a slow breath. For maybe 20 minutes, the figures look wet, look fresh, look as if the painter set down the brush and walked away just before you arrived. Then the sun drops a finger lower, and the glow fades, and the figures go back to being old. A ranger who worked these canyons for 30 years once said that visitors often come down from the panel feeling lighter, as if they had set something down without knowing it. Others come down feeling watched. A few come down and refuse to say anything at all. They get in their cars and drive south toward the highway, and they keep glancing in the rearview mirror as if waiting to see whether the giant turned his head. He never has, of course. He has stood there with the same wide eyes through every snow and every drought, through the coming of the horse and the coming of the railroad and the coming of the satellite. Something changed when he was made, something a person felt was worth saying in red on stone, whether some could find it forever. We do not know what, not yet. High on a butte in northern New Mexico, a slab of sandstone leans against the sky. The rock is pale gold in the morning, copper at noon, and dark plum when the sun begins to fall. On its face, someone long ago carved a spiral. Just a spiral. A simple coil of stone that turns in on itself like water, draining slow. The locals call it the sun dagger, though that name belongs to a few different places across the desert. Ranchers know it. Hikers know it. The old families who have lived in this country for 10 generations know it best. They will tell you, if you ask gently, that the spiral is not just a drawing, it is a clock. And at certain days of the year, it tells time in a way no wristwatch ever could. Twice a year, near the spring and fall equinox, a thin blade of light slips between two stones. Above the carving, the blade moves down the rock face as the sun climbs, and for a short while, it cuts the spiral perfectly in half. A dagger of gold, through a wheel of stone. Then it slides on, and the moment is gone for another 6 months. At the gas station in the nearest small town, the old-timers gather most mornings. They drink burnt coffee from paper cups, and lean against the counter and trade what they know. One will tell you his grandfather rode out to the butte every March, as a boy, with a family on horseback. Another will say her great-aunt could name the day the light would land just right, without ever owning a calendar. A third will shrug and say his uncle thought the whole thing was an accident. Stones fall. Spirals get carved. Sometimes light just lands where it lands. That argument has been running in this town longer than anyone can remember. The believers say the old carvers knew exactly what they were doing. They picked the rock, picked the angle, picked the depth of the groove. They watched the sun for 100 years before they ever lifted a chisel. The skeptics say people see patterns everywhere. Stare at a cloud long enough and you will find a horse in it. At the tavern down the road, the talk turns softer when the sun goes down. A rancher named Delbert, who has worked these hills for 50 years, says he saw the dagger touch the spiral once with his own daughter beside him. He says the air went still, the crickets stopped, the horses dropped their heads. For about 3 minutes, he says, the canyon felt like it was holding its breath. Then the light moved on, and the world started up again. Other folks have their own versions. A woman who runs the post office says her mother used to leave a small offering at the base of the rock every equinox, cornmeal mostly, sometimes a feather. She did it her whole life and never told anyone why, only that her own mother had done the same. The post office woman still does it now, though she will not say so out loud. The church on the edge of town has a different view. The pastor there, a kind man with grey hair and dusty boots, tells visitors the spiral is beautiful, but should not be worshipped. He says the old Carvers were just people, like you and me, marking the turning of the seasons. He says wonder is fine, worship belongs elsewhere. Then he smiles and adds, almost to himself, that the spiral is a marvelous thing all the same. The Pueblo families who live nearby keep most of their knowledge close. When they speak of the spiral, they speak carefully. Some say it marks a story about emergence, about coming up into this world from the world below. Some say it tracks the migration of a clan. Some say it does both at once, because a single carving can hold more than one truth. They do not feel a need to settle the matter for outsiders. And so the talk goes around. The diner, the feed stall, the bench outside the laundromat. Each person holds one piece of the spiral. The geologist sees stone. The astronomer sees alignment. The old rancher sees a moment that stopped his horses. The grandmother sees an offering of cornmeal at sunrise. No one in town owns the answer. No one even claims to. They only know that twice a year, on a butte that most maps do not name, a blade of light still slides down a wall of sandstone, and the spiral, patient as ever, still waits to catch it. Drive south through the high desert of Utah, past Moab, into the long quiet of Indian Creek country, and you will come to a slab of dark sandstone that the old maps call Newspaper Rock. The Navajo name for it is Tse-Hane, which means the rock that tells a story. The wall stands about 15 feet tall. It curves a little, like the page of an open book, set against the cliff. The face of the stone is the color of strong coffee, polished smooth by a million years of wind and water. That dark coating has a name. It's called desert varnish. Iron and manganese and tiny living things lay it down, grain by grain, over thousands of years. When the old carvers came, they took a piece of harder rock and chipped through the varnish. The lighter sandstone beneath glowed pale against the dark. Each cut became a small bright line, like chalk on a blackboard the size of a barn, and the carvers came for a very long time. That is the strange and beautiful thing about Newspaper Rock. The marks you see were not made in a single afternoon, or a single year, or even a single century. They were made across 2,000 years, maybe more. The oldest figures may go back to the archaic people, hunters and gatherers who walked this country before farming, before pottery, before the names we now use. After them came the Ancestral Puebloans, the ones some still call the Anasazi, who built the cliff cities and grew corn in the red sand. Then the Fremont, with their broad-shouldered shield figures and their strange flat headdresses. Then the Utes, who arrived later and added riders on horseback, because by then the Spanish had brought horses to the land. Then the Navajo. Then the early Anglo travelers, who sometimes carved their initials in places they should not have touched. All of them used the same wall. Picture that for a moment. A child stands at the foot of the rock in the year 200, watching her grandfather chip a deer into the stone. The deer takes shape, line by line, a soft tapping sound in the warm afternoon. 800 years later, another child stands at the same spot. The deer is still there, a little darker now, the lines beginning to fill back in with new varnish. The new child's father reaches up and carves a spiral above the deer. He does not erase the deer, he adds to it. 800 years after that, a Ute hunter on horseback rides up to the wall and carves the shape of his horse near the spiral. He does not erase the spiral, he adds to it. This is what makes newspaper rock so hard to read. It is not one message. It is hundreds of messages from dozens of different peoples, layered on top of each other like voices in a long, slow choir. Some figures speak to each other across 1,000 years. Some never do. Some were carved by hands that did not know the older marks were anything more than weathered scratches. There are over 600 separate images on that one panel. Bighorn sheep with curling horns, tall figures with square shoulders and tiny legs, bare paws, hands, snakes, wheels, six-toed feet, riders, hunters, strange beings, with antennae rising from their heads like radio aerials, though no one in those centuries had ever seen such a thing. Scholars have tried, gently, to sort them. They look at the style of the line, the depth of the cut, the darkness of the reformed varnish. They group some figures into the Glen Canyon style, and others into Ute. They guess at dates, within ranges of 200 or 300 years. They are honest enough to say their guesses are only guesses. The Hopi, whose ancestors lived this country, say the spirals at Newspaper Rock are clan signs, marks left by people moving across the land. Each spiral, they say, is a record of migration, a footprint in stone. The Navajo say the rock is a place where stories gather, and that you should listen quietly when you visit, because the rock is still speaking. Both of these readings may be true. Neither closes the book. You stand in front of Newspaper Rock at sunset, when the low light turns the cliff the color of hot embers, and you understand something simple. Whatever this wall means, it was never meant to be read all at once. It was meant to be added to. It was meant to be lived with, generation after generation, like a song that nobody finishes. The old ones drew, and the rock remembered. Deep in the green hills of western North Carolina, past the slow rivers and the laurel thickets, there sits a stone the size of a small barn. The locals call it Judaculla Rock. It rests in a quiet field outside the town of Cullowhee, tilted slightly toward the sky, grey and freckled with moss. Across its surface run hundreds of carved shapes, circles, curving lines, stick figures with too many fingers, a great 7-fingered handprint, pressed into the upper face like the rock once belonged to a giant. The Cherokees say it did. They tell of Judaculla, the slant-eyed master of game, a tall spirit who lived on the nearby Balsam Mountains and could leap from peak to peak in a single bound. One day, the stories say, he jumped down from his ridge and landed beside this stone. He steadied himself with one hand, and where his fingers struck, the marks remained. In the early 1900s, a soft-spoken farmer named Charles Parker began visiting the rock at all hours. He lived just down the dirt road. He had grown up hearing the Cherokee tales from older neighbors, and the stone had pulled at him since boyhood. Charles brought paper and charcoal and made rubbings of every carving he could find. He filled a wooden box with these dark, ghostly copies, and on winter nights he laid them across his kitchen table like puzzle pieces. He counted more than 1,500 separate marks. Some looked like simple cups pecked into the granite. Others looked like maps with little branching paths that ran towards small squares. There were figures that seemed to dance, and figures that seemed to fall, and one strange shape that Charles could only describe as a wheel with eyes. He wrote letters to museums in Washington and Raleigh. He asked anyone who would listen whether they had seen anything like it. The answers that came back were polite and uncertain. One scholar suggested the stone might mark a Cherokee boundary. a treaty in stone between hunting clans. Another believed it was a calendar, the cups tracking moons and the lines tracking the paths of stars over the long ridge to the east. A third said it was a record of a great battle, the falling figures showing the dead. None of them agreed. None of them could read it. Charles kept walking out to the stone alone. He went in summer, when the field smelled of cut grass and wild bee balm, and he went in winter, when frost crusted the carvings and made each line stand out sharp and silver. He noticed something the scholars had missed. The carvings were not all from one time. Some were deep and worn smooth, their edges softened by centuries of rain. Others were shallow, almost fresh, pecked into the stone by hands much later. The rock was not one message. It was many messages, layered like pages in a book, where every page had been written in a different language by a different writer. This made the reading harder, not easier. A symbol carved in one century might have meant one thing. The same symbol added 2,000 years later might have meant something else entirely, or nothing at all, or a quiet answer to the older mark beside it. Charles realized he was not looking at a sentence. He was looking at a conversation that had lasted longer than any nation on the continent. Some who studied the rock after him took a different view. They argued that the marks were not language at all, but the visions of medicine people who had come to the stone to fast and pray. The cups and spirals in this telling were the shapes that bloom behind closed eyes during deep trance, the geometry the human mind draws when it goes far enough inside itself. Others rejected this. They said the patterns were too organized, too repeated across too many miles of Cherokee country, to be only private dreams. Charles never picked a side. He died with his wooden box of rubbings still on the kitchen table. His daughter gave the box to a local museum, where it sat in a back room for many years. The rubbings are still there. The stone is still in its field, fenced now and tilted under a small wooden shelter, watched over by signs that ask visitors not to touch. On quiet evenings, when the sun drops behind the ridge and the field goes gold, the carvings catch the low light and seem to lift off the stone. The seven-fingered handprint glows softly at the top, just as it would if a giant had pressed his palm there and then stepped away. What he meant to say, if anything, the stone still keeps to itself. High in the dry hills of southern Arizona, tucked into a low fold of sandstone, sits a small chamber the locals just call the Painted Cave. The ceiling is low. You have to stoop to enter inside. The walls hold images in red, black, and white. Some look like deer, some look like suns, some look like nothing in this world, and no one can say for certain how old they are. The cave has been studied many times. Pieces of charcoal have been pulled from the floor. Bits of pigment have been scraped from the rock. The tests come back with wildly different numbers. One sample whispers a few hundred years, another murmurs 3,000. Another seems to suggest the paint was layered down across many lifetimes, hand after hand, voice after voice, like pages in a book no one signed. A retired park ranger named Hollis Vance spent 12 years walking those hills. He told a small audience once, in a quiet library in Tucson, what it felt like to sit in that cave alone. His voice was soft and slow, like a man recalling a dream he wasn't sure he should share. I went in there at dawn, he said. The light came through the mouth of the cave in a single pale beam, and when it touched the red paint on the back wall, the deer seemed to move. Not really. I know that, but the eye plays tricks, and mine had been playing tricks for a long time. Hollis said he never felt afraid in the cave. He felt watched, but kindly. He said it was like sitting in the corner of a room where an old grandmother was knitting, paying you no mind, content to let you stay as long as you were quiet. He kept coming back year after year. He brought no camera the last few visits. He said photographs flattened the place, made it small, took the breath out of it. A woman named Rosa Beltran, whose family has lived in that valley for 6 generations, remembers her grandfather taking her there when she was 9. He carried a small clay jar of water and poured a few drops on a flat stone outside before they entered. "It is polite," he told her. "You are visiting someone's house." Inside, he sat her down on the cool floor and pointed to a figure with a round head and rays coming off it like a sunflower. "He is older than our family," her grandfather said. "He is older than the church in town. He is older than the trail. Be gentle with your eyes." Rosa, now in her 70s, says she has never forgotten the smell of that cave. Dust and old smoke and something faintly sweet, like dried herbs left in a drawer for too long. She says her grandfather never told her what the figures meant. She asked him once. He smiled and said, "If I tell you, you will stop looking. And the looking is the whole point." A geologist named Daniel Park came to the cave in the early 2000s with a small team and a careful plan. He wanted to date the paint using a new method that measures tiny crusts of mineral that form over the pigment. He thought he could pin the marks down. He left with more questions than he came with. Every sample told a different story, he said later, in a soft, almost apologetic tone. It was like reading a letter where every sentence was written by a different hand in a different century. I went in thinking I would solve something. I came out feeling like I had eavesdropped on a conversation that had been going on for a very long time without me. He said the strangest moment came on his last evening at the site. He was packing his bag at the mouth of the cave, the sun sinking low and orange over the ridge. A breeze came up through the chamber behind him, soft and cool, carrying that dry, sweet smell out into the open air. He turned around. Nothing was there, just the painted wall, glowing red in the last light, the figures holding still as they had held for centuries. I waved at it, he admitted, half laughing. I felt I should. I don't know why. 3 witnesses, 3 quiet voices. None of them claimed to have solved anything. None of them claimed to have seen ghosts or heard whispers. They only describe a feeling, a sense of company, a sense that the marks on the wall are not finished speaking, even now, even to people who carry meters and notebooks and the long, patient curiosity of strangers come to listen. Down in the southwest corner of Texas, the Pecos River cuts through pale limestone like a slow blue knife. The country here is dry and bright, where ocotillo blooms red against the white rock, and the sky stretches so wide it feels heavy. Caves and shelters hide under the canyon rims, scooped into the stone by wind and water over countless seasons. And on the walls of those shelters, painted in deep red and black and yellow, you find them, the horned figures. They stand tall against the rock, sometimes taller than a grown man. Their bodies stretch upward like flames frozen mid-rise. Antlers curl from their heads. Spears or wavy lines float beside their hands. Animals gather at their feet, small and careful, like deer drawn close to a fire. Folks call this style Pecos River, and the oldest of these paintings may be 4,000 years old. Some say older. What strikes you when you start looking at panel after panel is how the same figure keeps showing up. Not just once, not just in one cave, the same horned shape, the same long body, the same downward curving lines at the side, appears in shelter after shelter across miles of broken country. Painters who lived and died generations apart, in canyons that never touched, kept drawing the same being. That is the pattern, and it is the thing that gives scholars and dreamers alike a strange quiet feeling in the chest. A researcher named Karen Boyd spent decades crawling under those overhangs with a flashlight and a brush. She mapped the panels inch by inch. She traced colors and looked at which figure stood beside which. And she came to believe that the Pecos River paintings are not random scenes. She thinks they tell stories, long stories, stories of creation, and the first hunt, and the journey of the spirit through different worlds. She points to the way. The figures repeat in the same order, the way the animals stand in the same positions, the way the colors stack from bottom to top in the same careful sequence. If she is right, these are not pictures. They are pages. Other scholars are not so sure. They remind us that finding a pattern is easy when you want one badly enough. They say the repeated figure could simply mean the painters all belonged to the same tradition and copied what they had seen from elders. They say the same shape can mean different things in different shelters, even when drawn by the same hand. They warn against turning rock art into a book just because we are people who love books. Yet the rhymes keep coming. A panel near Seminole Canyon shows the horned figure with a wavy line rising from his shoulder. A panel 40 miles away shows the same figure with the same line. A third site, tucked into a hidden bend of the Devil's River, shows it again. 3 painters, 3 generations, maybe 10, 3 caves that have never seen each other, and the same small detail, drawn the same way. The pattern stretches further when you walk back through what you've already heard in this story, the spiral that catches the sun in the southwest, the shield figures of Utah, the bird-headed beings drawn on faraway mounds across. Thousands of miles and thousands of years, certain shapes keep appearing. Horns, antlers, beings stretched too tall, hands raised, animals gathered, the same dream told in different tongues. Some native scholars from the region say this is no accident. They say the figures show beings their ancestors knew well. Beings who moved between worlds. Beings who taught the first people how to hunt and how to die and how to be reborn. They say the painters did not invent these shapes. They received them. And so the figures look alike because they are alike. The being is one being seen from many shelters. Others, sitting in university offices far from the Pecos, argue the resemblance is the simple work of the human mind. Give any group of people pigment and a wall, and sooner or later somebody will paint a tall figure with horns. It is what we do. Both answers might be true. Both might be wrong. The painters are not here to settle it. What you can say, standing under one of those rock shelters as the sun slants low and the limestone turns the color of warm honey, is that the figure on the wall is watching you, not in a frightening way, in a patient way, as if he has watched a long line of people come and go, each one trying to read him, each one walking away with only a piece of the meaning held loosely in their hands. Far out in eastern California, past the last gas station and the last marked road, there is a place where the earth seems to have been holding a conversation with itself for 10,000 years. The Coso range rises out of the Mojave like a line of dark ribs, black volcanic rock, pale dust, heat that bends the air in summer, and cold that cracks the stone in winter. The mountains are dry, broken, and quiet, and on their walls, somewhere near 100,000 carvings wait in the sun. That number is not a guess. Researchers have counted, and they have stopped counting, and they have started again. The Coso Range holds the densest collection of rock carvings anywhere in North America, more than any single canyon in Utah, more than any reach of the Columbia River, more than any cluster in the southwest. A whole library scratched into basalt, set inside a stretch of desert that almost nobody can visit. Most of the range sits inside a Navy weapons base. The carvings sleep under restricted sky. Walk into Little Petroglyph Canyon. On the rare day a guide is allowed to lead you, and the walls do something to your eyes. At first you see one bighorn sheep, then 10, then 100. They march along the rock in stiff, beautiful little bodies, horns curled like question marks, hooves drawn with a careful patience. Some are no bigger than a hand, some are larger than a child. They climb the canyon in herds, in lines, in scatterings, as if the stone itself were a slow river of animals moving south. Among them stand the people, or things that look like people, tall shouldered figures with patterned chests, square heads, headdresses that fan out like rays of the sun, hunters with bows and atlatals, figures holding what may be ceremonial staffs. Some wear masks, some have no faces at all. They walk beside the sheep, or above them, or through them, and nobody alive knows exactly what the meeting between them was meant to record. The Carvers were ancestors of the Numic-speaking peoples, the Paiute and the Shoshone, and their work spans an enormous stretch of time. The oldest images may be 8,000 years old. The youngest could be only 300 or 400. That means generations stacked on generations, hands following hands. Children growing old beside the same war their grandparents had marked. A single panel might hold a sheep cut in the time of the pyramids, beside a hunter cut in the time of the conquistadors. The stone keeps no order, only presence. The big question is simple to ask and impossible to answer. Why here? Why this range? Why so many? One theory holds that the Coso was a great hunting ground, and that the sheep on the walls are tied to the rain. Among many great basin peoples, the bighorn was a rain animal, a creature whose killing or whose ceremony could bring water down out of a hard sky. In a desert this dry, rain was the difference between living and not living. So perhaps the carvings are prayers, tens of thousands of prayers, layered like leaves. Another theory says the Coso was a place of vision. The shape of the figures, with their elaborate bodies and floating headdresses, matches what scholars call the trance image. Shamans seeking power went to high, lonely places, fasted, sang, and saw things behind their closed eyes. The walls in this reading are not records of hunts. They are records of journeys taken inside the mind. The sheep would be helper spirits. The patterned humans would be the shaman, transformed. A third view, quieter and more careful, says we are forcing a single answer onto something that never was a single thing. Over 8,000 years. People drew for many reasons: to remember a kill, to teach a son, to honor a death, to mark a season, to pass an afternoon in shade. The Coso may simply be a place that gathered meaning the way a low spot gathers water. Once one person carved a sheep there, another did, and another, and the canyon became a place where carving belonged. Indigenous voices today caution outsiders against tidy explanations. Some say certain images should not be spoken of. Some say the walls still hold living power, and that the carvers were not making art, but doing work, the kind of work that keeps the world in balance. The Navy quietly guards the canyons. The sheep keep marching, and every theory, however careful, ends at the same wall it began with. 100,000 marks, one range, no key. Let's drift east now, away from the dry canyons and red cliffs, into a place most people forget when they think of carved stone. Mississippi. Soft green country, slow brown rivers, air so thick in summer It feels like warm cloth pressed against your skin. The trees grow close here, hung with vines, and the ground swells in low, rounded mounds that look almost like sleeping animals beneath the grass. These mounds were not made by nature. They were built by hand, basket by basket, over many lifetimes. The people who built them are called the Mississippian culture, and they lived along the rivers from about 1,000 years ago until the woods swallowed their cities again. They grew corn in long fields. They traded shells from the Gulf and copper from the Great Lakes. They raised earthen pyramids taller than houses, and they carved a figure that nobody can fully explain. He is called the Birdman. You can find him etched on shell cups, hammered into thin copper plates, and pressed into stone tablets pulled from the mounds. He has the body of a man, but wings spread wide from his shoulders. His face is sometimes a beak, sometimes a human face with a long curved nose. His eyes are forked, marked with a black streak like the feathers around a falcon's eye. He dances, he runs. He holds a severed head in one hand and a stone club in the other. The Birdman appears at Moundville in Alabama, at Etowah in Georgia, and across the buried plazas of the Mississippi Valley. He turns up at Spiro in Oklahoma, hundreds of miles from the river that gave his people their name. The same posture, the same forked eye, the same wings, as if every carver in every town was reading from a book that no longer exists. But there is one carving that sits apart from the rest. It comes from a small forgotten mound in the Mississippi backcountry, a place barely marked on any map. The stone is grey, smaller than a dinner plate, smooth from long handling. On its face, the Birdman stands with his wings raised, and around him, carved in a careful ring, are marks that look like writing, not pictures, not animals, symbols, small and repeated with spaces between them, like words on a page. No one has read them. Scholars have looked, indigenous elders have looked. The marks do not match any known writing system from the Americas. They do not match Mayan glyphs, which are well studied and far to the south. They do not match the simple counting marks found on other Mississippian shell. They sit there on the grey stone, neat and patient, waiting. The mound itself is mostly gone now. Farmers leveled it long ago to plant cotton. The stone was found by a boy walking a fresh ploughed field after a spring rain, kicked up out of the red clay like a coin from a lost pocket. He carried it home in his hat. His mother washed it in a basin. They kept it on a shelf for 40 years before anyone thought to show it to a museum. By then, the mound was a memory. The field had been planted and replanted 100 times. Whatever else lay buried beside the Birdman had been broken and scattered by plough blades and weather. What makes the carving impossible is not the wings, or the forked eye, or even the strange symbols. It is the care. Look closely, and you can see how the carver worked. The lines are even, the spacing is measured, the figure is centered exactly on the stone. Someone sat with this object for a long time, in good light, with a steady hand. Someone who knew exactly what each mark meant and where it belonged. And then they buried it, or set it inside the mound, or pressed it into the hand of someone going on a long walk into the dark. 1,000 years passed. The cornfields became cotton fields. The cotton fields became pine woods. The Birdman waited under the clay with his ring of words around him, and when he finally came up into the light, there was no one left who could read what he carried. Some say the symbols are a prayer. Some say they are a name. Some say they are directions, or a count of years, or the title of a song that was sung at the carver's funeral. Each guess is reasonable. None can be proved. The stone sits in a glass case now, in a quiet room, lit from above. The Bergman raises his wings. The ring of marks goes on saying whatever it was always meant to say. And we go on standing in front of him, listening for a language we have forgotten how to hear. Deep in the canyon country of southern Utah, in a place called Horseshoe Canyon, there is a wall of sandstone that holds some of the strangest figures ever painted in North America. They call it the Great Gallery. The wall stretches more than 200 feet across, and the figures painted on it stand 7 feet tall, sometimes taller. Their bodies are long and dark, like shadows poured into the shape of men. They have no arms. They have no legs. They float. That is the word people use, float. The figures hang in the rock as if the ground beneath them never mattered. Some have huge hollow eyes painted in red ochre. Some have tiny faces inside their chests. Some have small creatures hovering nearby, antelope and birds, and shapes that no living animal matches. The painters worked in deep red and dark brown, mixing ground stone with binder and pressing the color into the sandstone until it became part of the rock itself. For a long time, people looked at these figures and felt something move in their chest. They saw spirits. They saw beings from another world. They saw the gods of an old people speaking across the centuries. The figures were called Barrier Canyon style, and they spread across hundreds of miles of Utah and into the canyons beyond. Wherever the style appeared, the floating travelers came with it. The skeptics arrived with good questions. They pointed out that the human mind loves to see faces. It loves to see meaning. Show a person a wet stain on a ceiling, and they will find an animal in it. Show them a strange figure on a wall, and they will build a religion around it. The skeptics said the floating quality might be nothing more than artistic shorthand. Legs are hard to paint on rough stone. Arms get in the way of the design. Maybe the painters simply skipped them. The skeptics had more to say. They argued that calling these figures shamans or spirits was a guess dressed up as knowledge. No one alive saw them painted. No one wrote down what they meant. The Fremont and the older peoples who lived in this country left no books, no letters, no captions. To say the floating travelers were holy beings was to put modern words into ancient mouths. The doubters preferred to call them simply figures, painted shapes, art without a known purpose. They had a third point too, and it was a strong one. Rock art scholars had spent decades reading shamanism into nearly every panel they found, from California to South Africa. The trance hypothesis became so popular that it explained everything, and a theory that explains everything often explains nothing. The skeptics said the field had grown lazy. It had stopped asking hard questions and started seeing visions everywhere. These are fair arguments. They are honest arguments. A careful mind has to respect them. And yet, there is something the skeptics struggle to account for. And if you stand in Horseshoe Canyon long enough, you begin to feel it. The figures are not random. They are not careless. The painters chose this exact wall, in this exact canyon. Far from any easy path, they carried their pigments down through miles of slick rock and dry wash to reach it. They climbed onto ledges to paint figures higher than a man can stand. They returned, generation after generation, to the same stretch of stone. Whatever the floating travelers were, they were worth a long walk and a hard climb. The figures also share a vocabulary. The hollow eyes appear in panel after panel, hundreds of miles apart. The tiny companion animals show up again and again, always small, always close to the larger figure's body. The proportions repeat, the postures repeat. This is not the work of one painter making up shapes alone. It is the work of a tradition passed hand to hand, holding its form across centuries. Traditions like that usually carry meaning. They usually carry stories. The deepest doubters tend to go quiet when they stand at the Great Gallery itself. They go quiet because the wall is too deliberate to be accidental, and too consistent to be casual. Something was being said here. Something mattered enough to bring people back through 100 generations of weather and drought and migration. What that something was, no one can prove. The skeptics are right that we do not know. The believers are right that the wall is not empty. The truth waits somewhere between them, painted in red ochre, floating just above the sandstone, watching the canyon with eyes that have not blinked in 2,000 years. The Moki left the canyons long before the first Spanish horse touched American soil. That is the word the old families use for them, Moki. The ones who came before, the cliff dwellers, the basket weavers, the corn growers who carved homes into sandstone alcoves, and then, one slow century, walked away. They left ladders leaning against empty rooms. They left pottery still nested on shelves, and they left walls covered in pictures that no one has ever fully read. The believers are the ones who sit with those walls the longest. Ranchers whose families have grazed cattle along the San Juan for 6 generations. Hopi elders whose grandmothers told them which clan made which mark. Park rangers with 20 years of dust on their boots. River guides who have floated the Green and the Colorado so many times the canyon walls feel like the rooms of their own houses. These people do not argue. They do not raise their voices. They simply tell you what they have seen, and then they let you decide. One such believer is a woman who has spent 40 years walking the panels above Bluff, Utah. Her hair is silver now. Her hands are brown as old leather. She knows where every flute player hides in the cliffs near Sand Island, where every bighorn sheep stands frozen in mid-leap. She will tell you, calm as still water, that the Moki drew migration, that the spirals are not decorations, but maps of movement, that each turn of the spiral marks a place the people lived before they moved on. The center, she says, is always the same place. The center is where they were heading. Scholars have argued with her for decades. Some say the spirals mark water. Some say the spirals mark the sun. Some say the spirals are simply what hands draw when minds drift. She listens to all of it. She nods politely. Then she goes back to the cliffs and traces the line with one finger and waits for the wind to agree with her. In Hopi country, the elders speak with the same quiet certainty. They say the markings at certain panels record the clan journeys. The Bear clan walked one path. The Snake clan walked another. The Fire clan came last. The pictures on the rock are not riddles to them. They are receipts, proof of where each family went and what each family was promised. When researchers ask for translations, the elders sometimes give them, and sometimes do not. Some stories belong to the rock and to the people who carry them. Some stories are not for sale. The cost of speaking up has been real. There was a time when sharing these old readings drew laughter from universities. There was a time when carrying that knowledge made you the kind of person who got left off the guest list. Believers were called dreamers, sentimental, naive. They were told that without writing there could be no message. They were told that pictures on stone could mean 1,000 things, which is the same as meaning nothing. The believers did not change their minds. They kept walking the canyons. They kept teaching their children. They kept showing visitors the panel where the corn stalk grows taller every year as you read it from bottom to top. The panel where the procession of figures all face the same direction, all moving towards something just past the edge of the stone. What they gained by not staying silent is hard to measure. It is the satisfaction of standing in a place and knowing it. It is the feeling of being trusted by a wall. It is the long, slow conversation with people who lived 1,000 years ago and left their words in red and white pigment, in pecked grooves, in handprints pressed against the rock like greetings. The Moki vanished from those canyons sometime around the year 1300. Drought drove them out, or war, or prophecy, were all three braided together. They walked south and east and joined the people who would become the Hopi and the Zuni and the Pueblo nations. Along the Rio Grande, they did not disappear. They simply moved, and they left their pictures behind like letters in a mailbox waiting for someone patient enough to read them. The believers are still reading. They do not claim to understand every figure. They do not pretend the work is finished. They just say that meaning is there, woven into the stone like thread into cloth, and that listening is its own kind of literacy. The walls speak softly. You have to lean in. You have to be willing to hear an answer in a language older than your own name. Travel south from the slick rock country down into the high desert of northwest New Mexico, and the land begins to flatten into something older. The wind picks up grit and carries it for miles. The sky here is so wide it feels like a lid. This is Chaco Canyon, and the stone remembers things the wind has long forgotten. The canyon itself is a shallow cut in the earth, maybe a mile wide in places, walled in by sandstone, the color of old bone. In summer, the rock turns gold at sunset, and in winter, it goes pink as a held breath. Junipers grow stunted and twisted along the rim, bent low by 1,000 years of cold wind. Sagebrush rolls out across the canyon floor like a sea of pale green wool. There are no tall trees here. There never were. The land is too dry, too high, too patient. And yet, 1,000 years ago, people built a city here. Great stone houses rose 4 stories tall, with hundreds of rooms. Walls fitted so tight, you can't slip a knife between the stones. They hauled timber from mountains 60 miles away. They cut roads straight as a ruler across the desert. They watched the sky like their lives depended on it. Maybe they did. On a high ledge, near a place called Piedra del Sol, there is a spiral carved into the rock. It is not large. You could cover it with your hand. But twice a year, at the summer and winter solstices, a dagger of sunlight slides across the cliff face and points straight at its center. The shadow moves slow as honey. The light finds the spiral, kisses it, and slips away. Whoever pecked that mark into the stone knew exactly where the sun would be on the longest day of the year. They knew it years before they made the carving. They knew it the way you know the face of your own mother. Up on Fajada Butte, a flat-topped finger of stone that rises 300 feet above the canyon floor, there are 3 great slabs of sandstone leaning against the cliff. Behind them, hidden in the shadow, someone carved 2 more spirals. At noon on the summer solstice, a single blade of light cuts straight down the middle of the larger one. At the winter solstice, 2 blades frame it on either side. At the equinox, a smaller dagger crosses the smaller spiral. The slabs were not placed by wind. Someone climbed up there and set them. Someone waited and watched and adjusted season after season until the light did exactly what they wanted. The land around Chaco seems to hold this watching. The canyon walls catch sound and throw it back doubled. A voice in the right spot can be heard a half-mile away, clear as a bell. Some of the great houses are aligned to each other across long distances, lined up with the cardinal directions, lined up with the moon's slow 19-year wobble across the horizon. The roads run between them, dead straight, ignoring hills and washes, as if the makers were drawing on a map only they could see, and the petroglyphs follow. stars pecked into stone, in clusters that some researchers say match real constellations, a crescent and a bright dot, side by side, that one scholar suggested might be a record of the supernova that blazed in the sky in the year 1054. That theory has its doubters. Others say the shape is just a moon and a morning star, drawn the way moons and stars have always been drawn. From California to Maine, the stone does not say which is right. What the land remembers is harder to argue with. The angle of the cliff, the way the light falls, the placement of the slabs, the roads, the buildings, the carved spirals waiting in the dark for the one moment a year when the sun finds them. Animals seem to know something too. Ravens nest in the high crevices and ride the canyon thermals in slow black circles. Coyotes pass through, but do not linger long. In certain meadows above the ruins, even the sagebrush grows thin, as if the soil itself were holding its breath. The people who built this place left around the year 1150. Drought, maybe. Politics, maybe. Something else, maybe. They walked away and did not come back. But the carvings stayed. The light still finds the spirals. The shadows still move across the stone, the way the carvers planned. The mystery is not whether the markings meant something. The mystery is what they were waiting for the rock to say. Out in the Carrizo Plain of central California, the land lies flat and pale, like an old sheet stretched between two mountain ranges. The grass turns gold in summer and silver in winter, and the wind moves across it in long, slow waves. In the middle of all that open country sits a low ring of sandstone, half buried like the broken rim of a clay bowl pressed into the earth. The locals call it Painted Rock. You can walk inside it through a single narrow gap, and when you do, the wind seems to drop, and the air grows still as a held breath. The walls inside that stone bowl are covered in figures, red ones, black ones, white ones, hams and beasts and zigzag lines and creatures with too many arms, and among them, in one quiet corner, stands a single lone figure, tall, thin, painted in faded ochre, with arms held slightly out from its sides. It looks like it is waiting for someone. It has stood there, by the best guesses of those who study such things, for at least 1,000 years. Nobody knows who that figure is meant to be. The Chumash, the Yokuts, and the Salinan all lived nearby, and each of their descendants tells the story a little differently. Some say the lone figure is a guardian set there to watch the inside of the bowl. Some say it is a dreamer caught in the middle of a vision. Some say it is no person at all, but a spirit that came down once, paused at the rock, and left only its shadow behind. What is strange is that this lone figure is not alone in the wider sense. Across the country, in places that never spoke to one another, the same kind of solitary painted watcher appears again and again. Travel northeast, far across the deserts and the Rockies and the long brown plains, and you come to the bluffs of the Mississippi Valley. There, on certain stones tucked into the wooded hills above the river, a single tall figure stands with arms slightly raised. Different paint, different stone, different people, separated from the Carrizo Plain by 2,000 miles and uncounted generations. Yet the pose is nearly the same. Go north from there, into the boreal country of the Great Lakes, and the Ojibwe pictograph sites along the granite cliffs hold their own lone watchers. Tall, simple, often red, often placed alone on a high rock face above still water. Travelers in birch bark canoes would pass below them and leave small offerings of tobacco on the ledges. Drift south to the Pecos River country of Texas, and among the wild tangle of horned dancers and snake bodies, you will sometimes find one figure set apart from the rest, just one, standing quiet at the edge of the panel, as if it had stepped back to let the others have the stage. The pattern is too widespread to be a coincidence, and too scattered to be a copied design. People who never met, who spoke languages with no shared roots, who hunted different animals and wore different skins, all painted the same kind of standing figure on the same kind of stone. A lone watcher, a pause in the noise. Some who study these things believe the answer lies in something deep inside the human mind. They suggest that when a person closes their eyes long enough, or sits in the dark long enough, or fasts long enough, certain shapes rise up from within. A figure with arms slightly out, a spiral. A row of dots. They call these forms entoptic, meaning born inside the eye. If true, it would mean the lone watcher is not a person or a god, but a shape the mind itself makes when it goes quiet. Others reject that idea entirely. They say the lone figure is a real being remembered by real people, a teacher, an ancestor, a first one who came before. The Chumash elders who still tell stories of painted rock do not speak of inner visions when they describe the lone figure. They speak of someone who came, who stayed, and who is still standing there even now. Both could be true. Neither could be true. The figure at Painted Rock does not say. What it does instead is wait. The sun crosses the bowl every day and lays its slow light across that faded ochre body. The wind comes in through the gap and curls around it. Lizards rest in the shadow at its feet, and, somewhere far to the east, on a granite cliff above a black lake, another lone figure stands in the same pose, watching its own quiet water, holding its own old silence, waiting for a meaning no living tongue can fully give it. Travel east now, far from the red deserts and the high mesas. Cross the long miles of the country until you reach the soft green of Massachusetts, where the Taunton River runs slow and brown through marshland and oak. There, on the eastern bank near the town of Berkeley, a great stone once sat half buried in the tidal mud. It was the size of a small cabin, grey and broad, with one slanted face turned toward the water. People called it the Dighton Rock, and for almost 400 years, no one could agree on what was carved into it. The boulder weighs about 40 tons. Its marked face is roughly 11 feet wide and 5 feet tall, and the carvings cover nearly every inch. Lines twist and tangle across the stone like vines. There are stick figures with arms raised. There are shapes that look like letters, and shapes that look like animals, and shapes that look like nothing at all. The grooves are shallow, worn soft by centuries of river water, rising and falling against the rock twice each day. The first written account came in 1680. A minister named John Danforth made a drawing of the markings, and that drawing still survives, tucked inside the British Museum. His sketch shows a wild, crowded panel of symbols. He believed they were the work of native people, made long before any European arrived. That should have settled the matter. It did not. What followed was one of the strangest debates in American antiquity. Cotton Mather wrote about the rock in 1690, calling its carvings a riddle. A French scholar in the next century declared the marks were Phoenician, left by sailors from the ancient Mediterranean who had somehow crossed the Atlantic. Another writer saw Norse runes and claimed the stone was a memorial left by Viking explorers. Yet another saw Hebrew letters and built a case for the lost tribes of Israel. A Portuguese historian in the 1900s pointed to faint lines he believed spelled out the name of Miguel Corte Real, a navigator who vanished at sea in 1502. Every group who looked at the stone seemed to find their own ancestors written there. The Phoenicians, the Norse, the Portuguese, the Israelites, the Egyptians, the Chinese. Each scholar produced careful tracings, and each tracing somehow emphasized the lines that supported their theory and softened the ones that did not. The boulder became a mirror. People saw what they hoped to see. Through all of this, the simplest answer kept getting pushed aside. The Wampanoag people had lived along the Taunton River for thousands of years. Their ancestors carved on stones throughout the region. The marks on the Dighton boulder match the style of other Algonquian petroglyphs found across New England, with their stick figures and sun shapes and webbed lines. The oral traditions of the local nations spoke of the rock as a place of meaning long before any colonist arrived with a sketchbook. Still, the boulder was treated as a foreign puzzle. In 1963, workers lifted it out of the riverbed, where it had sat for who knows how many centuries. They built a small museum around it in Dighton Rock State Park. You can stand in front of it today, behind glass, in a quiet building that smells of old wood and damp stone. The carvings catch the overhead light at strange angles. Some lines almost glow, others disappear depending on where you stand. Modern photographers have used raking light and digital enhancement to map every groove on the surface. The newest studies suggest the panel holds layers of carving from different eras. Some marks may be 300 or 400 years old. Others may be far, far older. A few might be colonial graffiti, added by curious settlers who chiseled their initials over work they did not understand. That is the trouble with the Dighton boulder. It is not one message. It is many messages, scratched on top of each other across centuries, in tongues no living person fully knows. The stone is real. You can touch the cold of it through the glass. You can trace its outline in old engravings printed in books from the 1600s. It is one of the most documented rock art panels in the Western Hemisphere, and it remains one of the least understood. Maybe that is the lesson hidden in its tangle of lines. A surface can hold many voices. A boulder can speak in several tongues at once. And sometimes, when a thing has been carved and recarved and dreamed over for 400 years, the truest reading is the one that admits we are still listening. There is a place along the Colorado River where the rock leans down toward the water, like an old man bending to drink. The stone there is dark, almost the color of wet cinnamon, and across its smooth face runs a line of carved footprints, bare feet, right, then left, then right again. They walk in a steady pace across the rock, down the slope, and straight into the river. Where the water laps the stone, the tracks disappear. Nobody knows who carved them. Nobody knows where they were meant to go. But families along that stretch of river have been telling the story for as long as anyone can remember. Grandfathers told it to fathers. Fathers told it to children sitting on porch steps in the long summer evenings. And the children, grown now, still tell it at holiday tables when the plates are cleared and the coffee comes out. The story changes a little with each telling. That is how stories live. In one version, the tracks belong to a young woman who walked into the river to meet a spirit she had loved in a dream. In another, they belong to a hunter who followed a white deer down to the bank and never came back. In a third, the oldest version, the tracks were made by the first people, the ones who came up from beneath the water at the beginning of the world. They walked out of the river to start their lives on dry land. The carvings in that telling are not footprints leaving. They are footprints arriving. The families who live nearby have favorite versions. The ranchers downstream lean toward the hunter. The folks in the small town upriver prefer the woman and the dream. The older indigenous families, when they speak of it at all, tend to talk about the first people, though they say it softly and only to those they trust. What everyone agrees on is the count, 17 footprints. No more, no less. Children have been sent down to the rock with chalk and slate to count them generation after generation, and the number has never changed. 17. There is a girl, now a grandmother, who remembers being lifted onto her father's shoulders in 1952, so she could see the tracks from above. She remembers the river was low that year. She remembers her father pointing at the prints and saying, in a voice she had never heard him use before, that you should never step in them, not even to measure, not even to play. The footprints belonged to whoever made them, and they were still walking. She told that to her own children. Her children told it to theirs, and now her great-grandchildren, who have phones and cars and lives in cities far away, still know not to step in the prints when they come home in the summer. Scholars have come to look. Some say the carvings are very old, maybe 3,000 years, judging by the patina that has crept back over the cut marks like slow, dark moss. Others say they cannot be that old, because the river would have worn them away. A few have suggested they were made in stages by different hands across many centuries, each new carver adding a print to continue the line. If that is true, then the walk depicted on the rock took longer than any single life. It was a journey passed down, foot by foot, by people who agreed on where it was going. There is a competing idea, quieter but persistent, that the tracks were never meant to record a person at all, that they were a kind of instruction, a way of saying, this is where you cross, this is where you enter, this is where the world above meets the world below. In that reading, the prints are not memory, they are a map. Both ideas live side by side, the way stories do in a family. Nobody has settled it. Nobody is in a hurry to. What the families know is this: when the river is low, in late summer you can sometimes see one more print just beneath the surface, faint as a held breath, half eaten by current and time. Children point at it and whisper. Parents nod and say nothing, and the count of 17, the one everyone has agreed upon for generations, suddenly feels less certain. Maybe the walk continues under the water. Maybe it always did. Maybe the carvers knew that the river was not the end of the path, but the middle of it, and the rest of the tracks are simply waiting somewhere we cannot follow. The families keep the story. The rock keeps the footprints, and the river keeps walking. Out on the high plains of eastern Montana, where the grass runs yellow and the wind never quite stops, there sits a low, pale boulder that locals have called Cup and Saucer Rock for as long as anyone can remember. The stone leans slightly to one side, like a tired old man resting on his elbow. Its top is worn smooth from 1,000 summers of sun. Around its base, the prairie spreads flat and wide, broken only by the slow shadows of clouds. Across the face of that boulder run, carvings of snakes, not ordinary snakes. These have forked tongues and jagged bodies that zigzag like cracks of lightning across a summer sky. Some have small round cups carved beside them, hollowed into the stone like little bowls waiting to catch rain. Others have shapes that look like saucers, shallow circles ringed with smaller dots. The carvings twist around each other, weaving in and out, until you cannot tell where one snake ends and the next begins. Nobody knows for certain who made them. The stone sits on land that was crossed by many peoples over many centuries. The Crow came through here. The Blackfeet came through here. Before them, older travelers whose names we do not have left their own marks on the prairie. The lightning snakes might belong to any of them, or to all of them, or to someone older still whose stories slipped away before anyone could write them down. Scholars have argued for years about what the snakes mean. Some say they record real storms, lightning strikes that hit the boulder itself and split the rock with a crack of thunder. Others say the snakes are spirits, sky beings who carried rain to the dry grasslands and were honored with these careful marks. A few have suggested the cups and saucers were used in ceremonies, filled with water or paint or something more sacred, then poured back into the earth. Each theory has its supporters, each theory has its doubters, and the truth is, after all the books and all the studies, no one can say for sure which one is right. But step back from the argument for a moment. Look at the stone itself. Look at the careful work it took to carve each line. A person knelt here. A person held a harder stone in their hand and tapped until the shape of a snake appeared. They did this knowing the wind would keep blowing. They did this knowing the sun would keep rising. They did this because something had happened here that mattered to them. Maybe a child was struck by lightning and survived. Maybe a holy person had a dream beneath this rock and woke with the snake still moving behind their eyes. Maybe a great storm rolled across the plains one night and broke a drought that had been killing the grass and the buffalo and the people. Maybe a young man came here alone to fast, and on the fourth day the sky opened and the snakes came down and spoke to him in a language he could feel in his bones. We will never know which of those stories is the real one. The person who carved the first snake is long gone, and so is the person who carved the last. The community that gathered here, that brought their children here to point at the marks and explain what they meant, has scattered into the wind like seed, but the marks remain, and the marks tell us something, even if we cannot read them. They tell us that a group of people once stood on this prairie and decided, together, that this place was important. They tell us that whatever happened here was worth remembering for longer than a single life. They tell us that someone took the time to make it last. That is the quiet truth beneath all the theories. Before the snakes were a puzzle, they were a memory. Before they were a mystery, they were a promise to the children who would come later, and to the grandchildren of those children, that something real had happened on this patch of ground. The wind still moves through the grass, around cup and saucer rock. The sun still warms the pale stone in the afternoon. In the evening, when the light turns gold and slants low across the prairie, the carvings deepen and stand out sharper, as if the rock is remembering what it once was told. The snakes still curl across the stone. They still wait, patient as ever, for someone to come close and listen. And maybe that is enough. Maybe listening is the right way to honor them, even if understanding never quite arrives. Step out into the desert at night. The sun has been gone for hours now, and the heat has lifted off the stone like a coat slipping from tired shoulders. The air smells of sage and warm dust and something faintly sweet that only blooms after dark. Your boots crunch on small pebbles. Somewhere far off, a coyote laughs once, then falls silent. You are standing in a wide wash between two red walls. You cannot see them clearly anymore. You can only feel them, the way you feel a person in the room with you even when the lights are out. The cliffs rise on either side, like the shoulders of something sleeping. Above you, the sky has opened into a deep black bowl, and the stars are so thick they look spilled. The Milky Way arches from one rim to the other. It is not a faint smear here. It is a river of milk poured across the dark, bright enough to cast the faintest shadow on the pale sand at your feet. You tilt your head back, and the stars seem to press down on you, soft as snow. The wall to your right holds carvings, You cannot see them now, but you know they are there. Spirals and antlered figures and rows of small dots, the same shapes carved into stone 1,000 miles north and 1,000 miles south. The same spiral spins on a cliff in Utah, on a boulder in Arizona, on a slab in California, on a shelf of basalt in Oregon. Always the spiral, always the figure with the raised arms, always the row of small standing people, hand in hand, marching across the rock. That is the strange part. That is the thing that keeps people coming back. The desert is enormous. The mountains between these places are tall and cruel. The rivers do not connect, and yet the same symbols repeat, traced by hands that should never have met. Some scholars say the symbols are universal. They say that any human mind, sitting in a dark cave or staring at firelight too long, will see the same shapes, spirals, grids, zigzags, dots in clusters. The brain produces them on its own. So people across the West, separated by deserts and centuries, drew the same things because they all saw the same things behind their eyes. Others disagree. They say the patterns are too specific to be accidents. The horned figure with the flute, the snake that bends like lightning, the birdman with outstretched wings. These show up too often, in too many places to be coincidence. They argue that ideas traveled, songs traveled, stories walked from camp to camp, along trade routes older than any road on a modern map. A symbol learned at one fire was carried to the next, and the next, until it spread across half a continent. Neither side can prove it. The carvings do not speak, they only sit. A small breeze moves down the wash. It is cool now, almost cold, and it brings the smell of distant water, some hidden seep tucked into a crack you will never find. The grass at the base of the cliffs whispers. An owl calls from somewhere up on the rim. 2 soft notes, then nothing. You think about all the nights this place has held, every night for 10,000 years, give or take. The same stars wheeling overhead, the same coyotes laughing, the same wind coming down the same wash. Someone stood here once with a piece of antler or a sharpened stone, and they reached up and tapped a spiral into the rock by starlight. Maybe they hummed while they worked. Maybe they were alone. Maybe their children slept in a shelter just around the bend, breathing softly, dreaming of nothing in particular. That person looked up and saw the same sky you are seeing now, the same river of milk, the same scattered diamonds. They drew a spiral, and somewhere far away, another person was drawing the same spiral on a different wall under the same sky. Maybe the symbol meant the sun. Maybe it meant a journey. Maybe it meant water, or a song, or a name. Maybe it meant something there is no word for in English, and never was. You stand in the dark and feel small, not lonely, just small in the good way, the way a single grain of sand is small inside an hourglass that has been turning forever. The stars do not blink, the cliffs do not move, and the spirals wait, patient as stone, for the morning light to find them again. Twice a year, when the day and the night weigh exactly the same in the sky, something happens to the old stones. A shape of light slides across a carved spiral. A dagger of sun touches the eye of a painted figure. A shadow lines up with a notch that someone chiseled 1,000 years ago. And for a few breathless minutes, the rock seems to wake up. People gather in the desert to watch it. They come in folding chairs and old trucks. They bring blankets and quiet children. They wait in the cool blue hour before dawn, while the sage smells sharp and the stars fade one by one. Then the first edge of sun crests the canyon wall, and the marking that has waited all year suddenly glows. A ring of light circles a pecked dot. A blade of gold slips between two boulders and lands on a coiled snake. Somebody whispers, somebody cries, and the moment passes as quietly as it came. This is the legacy of the carvings. Not a museum, not a book. A way of standing still twice a year and letting the land show you what it remembers. In small towns near these panels, the equinox has become a season of its own. In Bluff, Utah, the diners fill up with travelers who came for the dagger of light at Hovenweep. In Cortez, Colorado, kids learn the words solstice and equinox before they learn long division. Ranchers who never set foot in a college classroom can tell you when the shadow will fall on the cliff face above their north pasture. They learned it from their grandfathers, who learned it from the land itself. The festivals are small, gentle things. A potluck under cottonwood trees, a drum circle by a fire ring, an old man with a flashlight pointing out the way. The spiral catches the first sun. Nobody charges admission. Nobody sells t-shirts. The point is the light, and the light belongs to everyone who shows up before dawn and waits. A certain way of looking at the world grew from these gatherings. People who live near the carvings speak about time differently than people in the cities. They talk about the year as a wheel. Mutterline, spring and fall are not just weather to them. They are appointments, doors that open in the rock for a few minutes and then close again until next time. Children raised in these places grow up knowing that their elders, going back farther than memory, watch the same shadows touch the same stones. That is a strange feeling to carry in your chest. It makes a person walk slower. It makes a person look up at the cliffs and wonder who else, in what century, stood right here, holding their breath, waiting for the sun. The Hopi Mesas keep their own equinox watchers. So do the Zuni. So do the Tewa and the Navajo. These traditions never went away. They were not lost and rediscovered like some buried treasure. They were carried in songs and in the way grandmothers taught their grandchildren to read the horizon. The outside world only recently noticed when archaeologists first published photos of light daggers striking spirals at Fajada Butte in the late 1970s. The news traveled fast. People drove from all over the country to see for themselves. Some of those visitors stayed. They opened bookstores and small galleries. They learned slowly that the land had its own clock, and that the clock did not run on their watch. The Pueblo nations, for their part, have asked visitors to be careful. Some sites have been closed because too many feet wore down the soft sandstone. Some markings have been damaged by people trying to touch the light. The legacy includes that lesson too. The carvings are not just images, they are appointments. The old ones made with the sun, and breaking the meeting place breaks the meeting. In the towns that ring these canyons, you can feel the shift twice a year. A hush settles over the diners and gas stations the night before. People go to bed early. Alarms ring in the dark. Headlights wind out along dirt roads toward the cliffs, and in the morning, when neighbors meet again at the post office, they nod at each other in a quiet way that means, yes, I saw it too. Whether the carvings were meant to be calendars, or prayers, or both, or something else we have no word for, the people who live among them have made a culture out of waiting for the light. A patient culture, a listening culture, a culture that knows the desert wall is still keeping appointments older than any country. Now the story drifts west, far from the dry red canyons, to a place where the air smells of rain and cedar. The Columbia River cuts a long, slow path between Oregon and Washington. The cliffs there are dark basalt, slick with moss, draped in fern. Waterfalls slide down the stone in white ribbons, and along that river, Set into the basalt like quiet sentinels are faces. They are old, carved and painted by the people who lived along the Columbia for thousands of years. Round faces with hollow eyes, tall figures with rayed heads like small suns peering out from the rock. The most famous of them is called Sagaglalal, which means she who watches. She sits high above the old village of Nixluidix, her painted eyes wide, her grin fixed and gentle, looking down at the water as she has looked for centuries. This is the place where our wanderer comes in. Her name does not matter for the telling. Say she was a granddaughter or a great-granddaughter of a Wishram woman who knew the old village before the dams came. Say she grew up far away in a small apartment in Chicago, where her grandmother kept a single photograph of Sagaglalal taped to the kitchen wall. The photograph was faded and creased at the corners, but the face on it was clear. The grandmother told the story the way her own grandmother had told it. Coyote came up the river long ago. He found a woman who watched over her people from a high house on the cliff. He asked her what kind of chief she was. She said she watched, and she warned, and she kept her people safe. Coyote told her the world was changing. He said women would no longer be chiefs in the time to come. So he turned her into stone and set her face into the cliff, so she could keep watching, even when she could no longer speak. The girl in Chicago grew up with that story, the way other children grow up with nursery rhymes. She did not see the river. She did not see the cliff. She saw only the photograph and the cracked kitchen wall and her grandmother's hands moving as she spoke. The faces in the gorge became, for her, a kind of secret country, a place she belonged to without ever having stood there. She grew up. Her grandmother died. The photograph came down off the wall and went into a box with letters and a beaded barrette. The years moved the way years do. She married, divorced, took night classes, worked in a hospital cafeteria, and one spring, when she was almost 50, she got into a used car and drove west. She drove for 4 days through the flat fields of Iowa, across the broad spine of the Rockies, down through the sage country, and then up into the rain shadow, where the pines grow tall and the rivers run cold. She came over a rise one morning and saw the Columbia for the first time. It was wider than she had pictured. The water moved slow and silver under a low grey sky. The basalt cliffs rose up on either side, dark and wet, hung with curtains of green. She found her way to the place where Sagaglalal still watches. She was not allowed to walk up to the face. The site is protected now, visited only with guides from the Confederated Tribes. So she sat on a flat rock at a distance and looked up. The painted eyes were smaller than she had imagined. The grin was just as her grandmother had described. She did not cry. She had thought she might. Instead, she sat very still and let the cold river wind move across her face. She thought about the carving. She thought about the hands that made it and the eyes that had stared back at it for 1,000 years before her grandmother was born. She thought about Coyote and about chiefs and about what it means to watch over people you can no longer speak to. Nobody knows fully what Sagaglalal means. Scholars argue. Some say she marks a burial ground. Some say she is a spirit guardian. Some say she is exactly what the Wishram have always said she is, and no further explanation is needed. The woman on the rock did not need a theory. She had carried the face across half a continent in a faded photograph, and now she had brought it home. She drove back to Chicago. A week later, she taped the photograph back up on a new kitchen wall, and the face kept watching the way it always had. Somewhere in the long story of these carved walls, There came a final hand, a last carver, working a last panel, with a last image in mind. We don't know who that person was. We don't know what year they set down their stone tool and walked away, but somewhere across the desert, on some sun-warmed cliff, a final mark was made. And after that, nobody added another one in the old way again. Think about that for a moment. Picture the last carver crouched at the base of a sandstone wall, the rock warm against their knee. The light is gold and slanting low. A breeze moves through the juniper. The carver lifts a hammerstone and taps and taps and taps, working a shape that has lived in their family for 100 lifetimes. Maybe it's a spiral. Maybe it's a figure with a feathered headdress. Maybe it's a deer, or a hand, or something we have no name for at all. When they finish, they stand back, they look at the wall, and then they walk down the canyon and into whatever came next. The hard part is that we don't know what they were trying to say in those last days. The carvings of the late period are some of the strangest in the record. They mix old shapes with new ones. They show horses sometimes, which means Spaniards had already come. They show riders and crosses and figures that look like soldiers in helmets. The world was already changing under the carvers' feet. Their people were already being pushed, scattered, taken, renamed, and still they climbed up to the rocks and made marks. Some scholars believe the late carvings are records of trauma, a way of writing down what was happening before memory could be broken. Other scholars say the opposite. They say the late carvings are acts of stubbornness, of beauty, of refusal, a way of saying we are still here, our stories still belong on this stone, our hands still know how to speak. Both readings might be true. Neither one closes the door. There are panels in New Mexico where you can see the layers stacked together, an ancient spiral underneath, a bighorn sheep above it, a horse and rider above that, and then, near the top, a small cross, carved by someone who had perhaps learned a new faith, but still climbed the old cliff to leave a mark in the old way. The wall holds all of it at once. The wall does not separate the centuries the way a book does. And so the question hangs in the dry air. What were the last carvers saying? Were they leaving a message for their grandchildren, in case the grandchildren were scattered far from the canyon? Were they speaking to the spirits one more time, asking for protection in a world tilting sideways? Were they marking a place so that any descendant who ever passed that way again would know, just by touching the stone, that their blood had stood here? We have no way to ask them. The people who could have explained these final markings in the words and ceremonies of their own tradition were not always allowed to keep teaching what they knew. Some traditions survived in whispers, some were broken, then slowly mended by elders who refused to forget. Some are still being put back together today by grandchildren and great-grandchildren who walk the canyons with notebooks and tobacco and quiet patience. Maybe that is the most honest thing to say. The carvings are not silent. They are simply waiting for the right listeners, and the listeners are coming back, generation by generation, learning the old names again, sitting with the panels in the long gold afternoons out in the desert tonight. The last panels are holding their warmth. The spirals are cooling under the stars. The horned figures are watching the cliff shadows lengthen across the sand. Owls are calling soft from the cottonwoods near the dry wash. Somewhere, a small wind moves through a slot canyon and makes a sound, almost like breath, almost like a low word in a language nobody alive can place. And the door stays open, not the door of a room, but the door of the question itself. What were they saying? What did they want us to know? Did they imagine us at all, standing here 1,000 years later, squinting up at their work in the slant of the late sun? Did they leave the panel finished, Or did they leave a space, on purpose, for whoever came next to add their own quiet mark? The wall has not decided. The wall is still listening, and somewhere in the warm red rock, the last carver's tap is still echoing, soft as a heartbeat waiting. So here we are, at the end of a long walk through stone and paint and quiet. The fire has burned low. The coals breathe in slow orange pulses, like something half asleep. Outside the ring of warmth, the desert holds itself still. The sky is wide and black, and the stars feel close enough to touch, scattered across the dark like spilled salt on velvet. Think of all the places we visited tonight. The red walls of Sego Canyon, where tall figures stand without mouths and without eyes, watching the dry wind move through the grass. Newspaper rock, crowded with deer and hands and spirals, layered like 100 letters mailed to the same address over 1,000 years. Judaculla's stone in the green hills of Carolina, soft with moss, its lines worn down by rain. The Coso range with its endless herds of sheep, hammered into black basalt by people whose names we no longer know. We sat at the Great Gallery, where the floating travelers seemed to drift just above the rock. We climbed to Chaco, where the sun finds a spiral once a year and slides a dagger of light through its center. We stood under the painted faces in the Columbia Gorge, those wide round eyes looking out over the river as it ran like liquid silver to the sea. And after all of it, the question stays open. Are these marks a language we could one day read, sentence by sentence? Or are they something older than language, something closer to song, closer to prayer, closer to a hand pressed against a wall just to say, I was here? Some scholars believe the patterns will yield to careful